Welcome back. In this video, I'm just going to quickly show you the finished product of what I've ended up getting. You can see that I've got my cave system door here, and that all works together. And as long as I don't jump into the terrain, you'll actually see that I've got a whole heap of different rocks that I've used. Now, the draw call on this is ridiculous, and what I mean by draw call is if you go into your game mode, you'll actually see something called your draw calls. Now, because this game's only just got this type of environment, these rocks, there's actually quite a lot of things that are being drawn that the player's not seen. So I wouldn't recommend this as a proper A triple plus game, but it is good enough to get you guys understanding the basics. So 459, and it does change, it spikes around 600. Okay. The other thing you might notice is we actually had an issue coming up with saying that there was 2 audio controllers in the scene. That actually comes through when you've actually got a second camera. So you'll actually have something called main camera in yours. So I'll just recreate it for you. And when I hit play, what you'll actually notice is it comes up with an error saying there are 2 audio listeners in the scene. That actually is when you've got a main camera and you have 2 of them with the 2 audio listeners. So in this case, I only need the player's camera, which is this one. It's what the player will see. So it comes from the player. However, the other camera that I just created, which you guys should already have by default, unless you've removed it already, is just a scenery view camera, which is not really what we need. So to actually get rid of it, I'm just going to select it and press delete. Now that will actually get rid of that 2 audio listeners error message. And there you go. So the next one that we actually want to look at is actually organizing it. As you can see, your hierarchy probably has all your rocks thrown in it as well. I've actually organized all the rocks into this empty game object. And I'm actually going to do it just to show you what I mean by that. So just to help you sort it out just a little bit better, we put everything into folders in our project window. And you can see that I've now created a new scenes folder here. The other thing that you'll need to do is do the same thing in your hierarchy, but you don't get folders. So what the common practice is to create an empty game object. So selecting game object and hitting create empty. You'll actually see that there is no information on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go through and reset its transform by clicking on the little gear icon and hitting reset, which takes it down. So just by pressing F refocuses, taking it down to 0, 0, 0. It doesn't have to be done, but it's just easier when you're trying to multi-select things later on. So from this game object, I'm not going to call it game object. I'm actually going to call this one environment. So just changing the name, hitting enter without the slash. We'll actually rename it to environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop everything that is environment related into that environment game object and have that environment as the parent. So the rocks is the first one. So I'm just going to drag and drop that in. And you'll notice that it hasn't actually moved the rocks, even though environment is all the way over in that back left corner. The next one I'm going to drag is the root, and you might not see it unless you're really looking for it. It's just a root that I've placed there to make it a little bit more different in a way, and to show you how it wraps around rocks. So I'm going to drag the root into the environment as well. And you'll see that that has that child. The next one is water. So again, the water is just where all the different bits of water that I've had, just dragging and dropping under environment. The doors, module 22, doors I'm just going to drag in. That's just all those pieces of wood and a collider. The point light is actually that green glow that you guys can actually see in the background. So if I increase the intensity, you see that green glow coming from there. Let's drag and drop that into environment. And what you'll see is I'll also drag the terrain and the directional light. So now we've got 2 things, the environment and the first person controller, which is all it currently is, which is what we're after. Okay, so the way that this game is going to work is, let's just bring my player up a little bit closer to the door so I don't have to walk as far. Hit play, and what you'll see is the player will walk up to this cave system and it'll say press E to enter cave or something along those lines. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to save what we have done by going File, Save Scene, or set Control S, and we're going to be working on our cave system in another scene. So when they press that letter E, it's actually going to load a new level, if you will. So I'm just going to go File, New Scene, and if it prompts you to save your changes, just hit Save. And you'll see that I've got a completely empty scene. Don't worry, your horror one is still there, but this one is going to be a new scene. Let's actually quickly go through and file and save this string straight up. So going into scenes, we can actually go through and call this one Cave Scene. Now, one thing you will notice in all my icons is it does have the synchronizing icon on top. That's just for the SkyDrive OneDrive system. So don't worry if you don't have that icon. So just by having that cave scene selected, we can actually start working on our cave system. Okay, so working on our cave system is actually quite easy with the way that we've got it, is we actually have the manufacturer cave for Underworld pack. If you don't, you can use a series of free rock samples that we've already used before, just by placing them around, similar to the way that we've done our door. But with the pack that we particularly have, is you can just drag and drop an entire cave system on that, which is pretty quick and easy. And you can keep on dragging and dropping these on. So you'll actually see that you've been given 4 different types of modules. You haven't been given the whole thing. That's if you're one of my students. If you're not a student and you're just watching this one off YouTube, I highly recommend you invest in that pack. It is a wonderful pack that you've got. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can actually just drag and drop it and line it up as best as you can. However, I'm not a big fan of doing that. What you can actually do, just to get it quicker, is you can use vertex snapping. You'll see that this shape here is almost the same as that shape there. So what we can do is we can do something called vertex snapping. So by holding down with the move tool selected, holding down V, it actually snaps to the vertex. And remember, a vertex is where the points are. If I snap that vertex to a vertex that's similar, and see how that lines up, almost every time you'll see it line up as best as it possibly can. Well, that's what I've found at least. Now there might be some discrepancies that you might want to play around with later on. And whilst I'm slowly accidentally flipping it upside down. So just this gap, it's a bit too high for me, so I'm actually going to go through it and then make the manual adjustment. If it doesn't line up perfectly, it's one of those things where it's always good to have that as a starting point. So from there, you can actually see that we're going to enter our cave from here, go down, and then it breaks off into more chambers. Now, you can play around with this however you want, but I don't particularly want that entrance there. So I don't have to put a cave system there. This is the cool thing that you can do. Just grab a rock, rotate it, and I'm just going to do this really, really quickly. But the more time you spend, the better with it. And let's just grab another rock to fill up that gap. Again, if you see why the tools are changing, I'm just cycling through W, E, and R to go through the move, rotate, and scale options. The keyboard shortcuts are better. So now all of a sudden, as the player comes in, they can't go left, they can only go forward and right. Now obviously that looks pretty crap as what it is, as just one big scaled up rock to fill the void and another one just to fill that little gap. Take your time with it and spend some time. Again, I'm just going to drag in another module, so let's drag in module 16, find where your door is, and rotate it around so it's at least in the right alignment. Okay, so now that I've got that there, I'm going to come in, I'm just going to snap it to just one of the corners just to get me started, or a lot closer. And you'll see that it hasn't lined up that great, so that's me just trying to rush through it. So already we actually have this cave system. That's probably a bit too high still. Let's drop that down. Okay, so now we have this cave system. As it comes down and through, you can head in here. Now here's another one that I'm just going to plug up the hole for. Again, I'm not taking my time with this, as you can see. I'm just going to rotate that just so it kind of plugs that hole. So you can actually see that that's where we stand. So it has that whole cave system. Alright, so how to decorate the internals of the caves. This one's actually going to, again, just be like, I'll show you some basic tricks and what you need to kind of do. So the very first one is I'm just going to drag some of these rocks out. And let's just go through, put that on there, down to the ground, duplicate that, rotate a little bit for some variation so it doesn't look like it's been copied and pasted. And what you'll see is you'll get this pillar inside your room. Now, one of the main things I like to do is get some more happening. So you can play around with this as much as you want. Stretch them if you need to. Be careful when you're stretching things because it does make some things look really weird. So some of those rocks do look stretched. And you can have these pillars in there so the player can walk around them. Okay, now you'll notice that there's a lot of stuff going on here. So the thing that I like to do, and you'll see me have done it a couple of times, is just click empty space and that will actually give you back your view. The next thing you can do is you can put some mushrooms and stuff around that you can see. And you can also put some crystals around. Now crystals here can actually be pretty cool because what you can do is you can actually start to get really creative with things and start to place them into the pillars. Now, one of the things you'll notice is it will actually get quite dark in some of these areas when you come in and play test. So just to show you that, we'll go to standard assets, bring in a free first-person controller, sorry, just dump him right there. Now you can see he's stuck in the ground, so just lift him up so he doesn't fall through and hit play. So already you can see that's that big empty space we had, and you can see that that cave is really, really dark, but those crystals do stand out quite a bit because they've got a specular component to them. Can't quite see the mushrooms there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take advantage of the fact that these crystals kind of glow, they do stand out, and by putting a point light with them. So game object, create other, point light. And what that point light's going to do is it kind of shines like a bit of a round object. You can see that yellow sphere. That's how it actually is going to glow. I'm going to place it directly over that crystal. Now this is what you can do for fire as well, but rather than it actually being white, we're actually going to make it that greeny, bluey colour. Just get a bit of a scared feeling to it. I'm going to ramp up the range to be a lot more than what it is, so increasing the range to be about 30, so it reaches further, it spreads that light. And I'm just going to duplicate it and place it up there. It's one of the things that's starting to get a bit too bright, so I might just turn down the intensity on the occasional one. So you can actually now see that when I hit play, on this side it's extremely dark in terms of this cave system. When I come into this part, it's got that glowy mystical effect, and you can see those pillars that I've placed in as well, and you can see around them, etc. So just a couple more things. So you can play around with settings like that, and now you can see mushrooms as well. The other couple of things that you do have access to is root large. So if you wanted to, you could actually bring in a really large root system. And one of the cool things you can play with is if you have it stretched across, let's just go something like that, you can then bring in the root small sections. And if you join them up to that tree, just rotate that one just a bit. Obviously you can spend a bit more time with this, but once you play around with it a lot more and made it hug the ground, etc., you can actually get some really cool effects happening as well. So I'm going to leave that one with you to play around with. In the only other thing you need to do is to create a door system. So same thing that we did with the other one, drag your pieces of wood out. I'm just going to turn off the fake lighting for the moment. Okay. Rotate, rotate. And what you want to do is you want to create that same type of door system that you had in the last one. If you want, you could even go back to your other scene and create a prefab if you know how to do that. And create a door system there as well, just so that the player, to get out of the cave system, they can go back up to here saying press E to exit cave, and it takes them back to that other scene. So that's what we really want to do. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you there. Create as much as you can. You can have as big a cave system as you want. So if you want to have it as a maze, that's fine. But just create it so it looks a little bit more realistic rather than just a big empty cavern. Add some stuff to it, whether it be branches, crystals, or your rock pillars, or stalactites even, so you can even attach a stalactite as well to give it that bit more cavey feel. Okay, but with that all said, have a go, try and create it. Once you finish creating, that's when we're actually going to start getting into the scripting and the coding and making our game actually function rather than just walking around a beautiful scenery. Otherwise, until the next video, enjoy.